Hey, this is the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling of Tony James podcast. And as always, the bells of justice are ringing. Hey, don't forget to check me out on Spotify, YouTube, and Facebook. The Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling of Tony James podcast over on Facebook at GBW Podcast. Hey, we got a lot going on today. I'm a little late to the party with some of the stuff, but sometimes I like to let it soak in and see if there's any backlash, aftermath, or more information before I get on it. So the first thing I want to talk about, this is we got a potpourri of down-home fixings today. We're going to talk about the end of Netflix and how Hogan has gone viral since. There was a Teddy Long quote about Hogan. There was a Kamala, the Ugandan headhunter quote that came out. Booker T has just recently talked about something that I do agree with most of his stuff. I didn't post the quote, but it's out there. He recently talked about Hogan getting booed. Matt Cardona, Mr. Independent Wrestling himself, even though he didn't win Independent Wrestler of the Year, that Mustafa did. Got a brief little thing about him. Tessa Blanchard has made the news. I think Tessa Blanchard is a great wrestler if you've ever watched her, especially I think it's in CMLL she's been at, and then she's now back in TNA. And then, of course, CM Punk decided to throw his hat into the ring here just lately here on the last episode of Raw. So talking about Hogan and the booing and everybody jumping on that and talking about Hogan getting booed. He did, and we talked about that in the Netflix era. And the last two podcasts I've talked about, season 3, I talk about the Netflix era. And I find it interesting, and what you're going to see on what I've got up on the screen is that it was the most talked about segment. And he was getting over without even knowing he was getting over. Now, of course, you can argue, well, they were booing him. They didn't really like him. They weren't booing him as a heel. They just were booing him as a person. Nonetheless, in the Netflix era, that fits. It used to not be how you got over. It was your character or what you were doing. But now, in the Netflix era, and this isn't just the WWE, this is in wrestling and as a whole, it has nothing to do with that because wrestlers put their private lives out there, and you're going to see what we're going to be talking about here soon. They put their private life out in the middle of everyone, and so they try to get likes and dislikes in what they do in their everyday life because there's no boundaries anymore. The fourth wall is down. There's no kayfabe. There's nothing. As Triple H once said, we need to get over it. They're not as serious about this as the fans are. They're okay with exposing who they are. And once again, it's a Netflix era issue. So I find it interesting what's going on here with Hogan and how he, if you've watched him, he's going about his business. He's selling his beer. He's doing his karaoke. He went to the inaugurational ball. He gets on Fox and does his commentary. He's doubling down on who he is. You got to remember he's 71 years old at this point. He really could care less. Kind of like what Bruno Sammartino. Once Bruno Sammartino hit a certain age, he really didn't care what Vince thought of him. He was going to talk about what he wanted to talk about. So nonetheless, Hogan's off doing his thing. Now, we have Teddy Long's quote, which is a pretty good one, and he talks about his relationship with Hulk and how Hulk's been a good guy to him. And there was some kickback on this. So Hulk's a great guy. He's always been a gentleman to me. The man called me out of the blue one time and did something with me that I know he didn't have to do. So I have a lot of respect for people when they do stuff like that, especially for me. I don't know if you've noticed, but most of the time, pardon me, when people talk about like Hogan, they never give the detail of what he did because it's personal. And so he knows something personal about them and has helped them out. And I know there's been times he's actually told people, I don't want people knowing I've done this. So he's done more behind the scenes than people give him credit for. Now, the kickback on that was that, well, I read a comment where they always roll out a token person of color that says something generically nice about Hogan to make it look like he's not a racist. This is you can see this throughout a lot of comments about Hogan, whether it be Bad News Brown, which he had nothing bad to say about Hogan, and when it talked about the booking and stuff, he blamed Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon promised Bad News Brown the heavyweight title. He promised him a run with Hogan. Hogan had nothing to do with that. So then the next one here we have from Kamala is Hogan treated me very well. I made a lot of money for him. I used to feel so bad when Hogan used to come to where I am. And when he saw me, he would say, "There goes my money." It would put a smile on my face because he was so friendly, but Hogan wasn't the payoff man. He didn't know how I was being treated. That all refers to Kamala was talking about his treatment in the WWF, how they took his dressing room, and it wasn't because they were always giving it to Hogan. Hogan actually made sure that Kamala was taken care of, but Hogan didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Kamala himself said that, and that Hogan always treated him nice, and they always did some really good stuff together. So once again, people saying that the way Hogan was, for every one or two bad things, you got the same amount of people saying good things. They're not brought to the forefront. Now, Booker T has a quote out there, and I didn't post it up here, but you can find it. And he's talking about the latest issue with Hogan being booed, and Booker T basically is saying that Hogan, he's lost and he doesn't know he's past his time. And the one thing I do agree with Booker T is, Hogan is a certain era and he has a certain thing he does. And the modern wrestlers, the Netflix era wrestlers, fans, and most of the wrestlers aren't into that. A lot of them weren't even born when Hogan, think about it. This is 2024. I know Hogan wrestled his last match around 2011, maybe, but his WWF, his WCW run, and coming back to the WWE with WrestleMania 19, the Mr. America stuff, the fans would have been, the 24-year-old fans and wrestlers would have been 3 years old at the time. So I agree with Booker T when it comes to he's got to evolve himself in a totally different way if he really wanted to get over with the fans. But remember, he's 71 years old. He's not worried about that. He's got his Hulk shtick, his Hulk persona that he's doing, and he's going to stick to that. And love him or hate him, that's where he's at this point, and I don't blame him at being 71 years old. There's some other things Booker T was talking about. He really didn't bury Hulk. He was just talking about that's why you get booed when you have some past discretions that you may either didn't take care of or did take care of. It just depends. We know he did take care of it. He did go on a tour of apologies and did do his own thing, and I cover that in one of my previous podcasts, but nonetheless, I thought those were interesting pieces because then you got guys like Jake Roberts who, to this day, say when he wrestled Hogan in '86, out of nowhere the fans stopped cheering for Hogan and started chanting DDT, and then when Vince said no, it's not going to happen, the fans just miraculously said, okay, we're going to cheer for Hogan again. You got guys like Jake Roberts. I just don't get his thought process. A lot of those guys come out and talk negative or talk how they're over. And I don't know how much of that Hogan really knows is being said about him. He had made that comment before that sometimes he catches on where wrestlers are piling on him and he doesn't know where that's coming from because at the time everybody was chummy, right? Once again, it's just a bad rap sometimes. I'm not giving him a pass on everything. I'm just saying that Teddy Long's pretty respected. Everybody had empathy for Kamala, and Teddy Long was pretty respected. And for him, he's the same guy in the same breath, Teddy Long, who could tell you a list of guys who he felt was racist behind the scenes. So, and I'm not going to go into detail who those are, but he has done a shoot interview and gone into great detail about the guys in the business who've been racist. So, nonetheless, I wanted to kind of talk about the Teddy Long, Kamala, Booker T situation, Hogan going viral. Now, this is the epitome of independent wrestling. This is the epitome of everything that encompasses the Netflix era of wrestling. I'm not a fan of Matt Cardona. I know he came out. He's been recently, once he got dropped. I don't need the WWE. I'm the independent king. I'm the king of independent wrestling, which I still don't understand because he spent most of his time in the WWE in the low cards, mid cards. He had his WrestleMania moment, but now all of a sudden he's Mr. Independent, which no longer, because the same one of the wrestlers, WWE Mustafa, I believe it is, he got back on the independent scene because he wanted to be his own man, and now he's Mr. Independent Wrestling. I guess if you spend enough time on the independents, but to be a true independent, they should give the award to a true independent wrestler, but that goes without saying. Here we go. Matt Cardona comes out. The crowd starts chanting Chelsea Green, and he says he's the only one that gets to blank her every night. Oh, boy. Hey, this is independent wrestling right here. And so he's going to say stuff like that. I know Chelsea Green had made a comment before how she'd like to get him back on WWE TV and get him back in the running. I don't know why they bring a guy like that back saying stuff like that. I know he's well-to-do. He's now pushing garage beer off the Hogan thing. He's Mr. Opportunity. How do I be original? I don't have to be original. I'll take other people's gear. I'll adapt it. I'll do everything that everybody else is doing and make it my own. Mr. Originality here. This stuff coming out in the ring. I've been on shows where guys have made stupid comments, and so he gets a cheat. Everybody loves this. This is your current fan, right? They love this stuff. He's talking dirty and how he's married to Chelsea Green and how he's having relations with her, and he's done stuff before. She's taking her top off, and it's cheap pops, cheap heat. That's what it's about now. Because if you remember, Triple H has already made the comment that it's not about developing characters and doing all that anymore. It's about giving the people what they want, giving the wrestlers what they want, and breaking that fourth wall down, saying they take it more serious than we do. So this, I'm sure, may not even be a blip in the screen, but this stuff is just tasteless, and I think is more of a black mark on wrestling than it is a positive. But I just saw that and thought, hey, let's talk about that one. Moving on to Tessa Blanchard. If you caught the last TNA big show, which they had a really nice turnout fan-wise, I got a picture of it here for you. Fans started chanting she's a racist at Tessa Blanchard. They chanted a bunch of things at her. She stayed in the pocket and fed into it, did her match. She defeated, I believe her name's Jordan Grace, took the title from her, and I thought it was I watched some of the clips from it. I like Tessa Blanchard. I know in the past there's this story going around that she's been racist in the back and rude to other female wrestlers in the back, and there's been a back and forth about what really happened, what was said, what wasn't said, and she went away. TNA got rid of her. She went away. She reestablished herself. She, of course, stands by the fact that she isn't doing what she's being blamed to be doing. But once again, when you're in the Netflix era, your personal life is what you're pushing. And whether she likes it or not, the fans are going to do that. And she's probably going to get racist chants every time she comes out now. And then TNA's got to decide, do we want to stick with this or not? So, anyway, I thought it was interesting, as you can see with the picture, if it should have come up by now, of the crowd. TNA pulled a really good crowd, and they've got some good stuff going on. And, of course, they're teaming up now with WWE, so it'll be interesting to see how long WWE, I know Tommy Dreamer made the comment that WWE will not dictate what TNA does. It's two separate things. They're just doing some stuff together through NXT. And, of course, WWE signs away Jordan Grace from them. How interesting is that? I'm not a big fan of Jordan Grace, but once again, it's not about what I like. When the modern, as Conan says, in the modern era, you get modern wrestling, and everybody thinks she's just the bee's knees. I don't get it, but hey, that's okay. Everybody has different tastes. But I find it interesting. WWE takes her away. They do a nice little, they're doing a little thing together now, TNA and NXT. And so now all of a sudden everybody is going to TNA. Is that the reason? I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. But I like Tessa Blanchard for her wrestling. I don't know a lot about her personally, and I'm going to keep it that way, a little kayfabe if I can for Tessa Blanchard. And finally, my favorite. Thank you, CM Punk. As this is airing last night on Monday Night Raw, CM Punk, according to his fans and the fans of wrestling, cut one of another great promo where he's talking about the Royal Rumble, and he even says, "You put Hulk Hogan in the Royal Rumble, I'll throw his dusty A over the top rope, and I'll kill Hulkamania once and for all." Thank you, CM Punk. For once again, Hogan's not there. He's 71 years old. We already know the fan base is moving on, but you're making Hogan alive and well again. I think that's great. I'm not a CM Punk fan. I know you're starting to see a trend here with who I like and who I don't. I never got CM Punk and his whole thing, his whole history of doing what he does, and supposedly being a great promo and all that. But nonetheless, I think this is great for Hogan's brand, even if he comes out during Saturday night's main event, which they're saying he might do, and he gets booed again. Nonetheless, they keep talking about Hogan, and I'm sure something will get thrown onto Hogan as something negative, according to this. But I just found it interesting. And then, of course, here the person that posted off the Hope page, "Oh, please, CM Punk can act as though he's challenging a 71-year-old Hulk Hogan, but let's be honest. The dude mentioned Roman Reigns, John Cena, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, and some jabroni named Sammy. And all Punk got was a minimal response from the audience. The only roar he got was when he mentioned Hulk Hogan. On behalf of the Hulkster, you're welcome, Punk. The GOAT is still more over than any of the current guys." There you go. You're going to have that argument between the traditional and modern, as Conan calls it, but we're going to call it the Netflix era. Once again, that's Punk saying, "Oh, I'm gonna talk personal. I'm gonna bring up the Hogan thing and ride that one." Nonetheless, Hogan fans appreciate you mentioning it. Any response in the current product is a good response. So there you have it. Hogan went viral when we started this, and he's still going viral at the end of it, thanks to CM Punk. Tessa Blanchard wins the women's heavyweight title, and TNA gets booed and called a racist for doing it. Booker T, Teddy Long, and Kamala, the Ugandan headhunters, made some comments about their feelings about Hulk Hogan and his situation. And then, of course, Mr. Independent Wrestling himself, Matt Cardona, let everybody know that he gets to have sex with his wife all the time. Good for you, Matt. I think that's great. It's nice when you're married to someone you get to have relations. How does this all affect independent wrestling? That's a good question. I'd love to hear your comments on that. Independent wrestling, how's it going to be affected by the Netflix era? I think it has already a little bit, and it's seeped in this past year or so. Maybe we'll do a podcast on independent wrestling and the effects of the Netflix era. I'd love to hear your comments. You can catch me on Spotify. You can catch me on YouTube at The Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling, a Tony James podcast. And you can catch me on Facebook at GBW Podcast. I ask that you click follow and subscribe. Whether there's 5 of you or 500 of you, I appreciate you. Hey, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. God is good, and I will see you at the matches.